There's a phrase that I love that I think it was Greg Laurie or someone who had said this, but he said, you can't stop a bird from landing on your head, but you can prevent it from building a nest.
This is the More Than Capable podcast. Life applies pressure in predictable places, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. More Than Capable exists for those who choose to prepare. No hacks, no shortcuts, no posturing. Just discipline, faith, and practices that help you stand when life presses down. Welcome. I am glad you are here. I think it's been a critical piece of maintaining my recovery from alcoholism is like I go to friends pretty quickly when it comes to some of these struggles that I've had. It's a very deliberate move on my part, and like as a part of that, I've had to let some friendships go. Not that I don't, love or respect the other person. It's just like, hey, this isn't lining up how I'm really approaching and viewing relationships as they pertain to like the buildup of the community around me and around others.
It's really draining though to, like, if you want a friendship like that and you're the only guy at that level of participation, it's really draining to be trying to drag that out of someone else, right?
Yes.
It is like a two-way street. And, that can sound real needy at 40 years old to like say that you need reciprocation of a text message. But at the same time, I think that reciprocation of a text message is just today's version of, yeah, I'll meet you for lunch, right? It's just like, it's how we communicate, whether that's right or wrong. It's how we do it now. And at the end of the day, really what you're solving for is exactly what you said. It's like, hey, my son is 2 years younger than yours. You have 2 boys. Your other one is this kid's age. Am I crazy? Is something wrong with this kid? Did you find something that worked and you solved for it? I mean, that alone is so nice to have, right? And so like, I would say that I don't think that if anyone does see that as like, oh, needy, that he needs a message response, like, I don't think that it's needy. It's like, it's just being a reciprocating good friend and helping a friend who's having a hard time with something, right? Or has a question about something or whatever. And, gone are the days of even a phone call, but definitely gone are the days of just swinging by your friend's house and having these conversations. I can remember my dad had, basically one really good friend growing up, and they didn't, it's not like they met often whenever I was the age of our kids. But when they met, they usually were cutting trees down and cutting wood. But they would have these conversations while cutting trees down and cutting wood. Now, as the kids, as we got out of the house, and then his name was Greg, he had a couple of kids, and as they got out of the house, those two started having donuts and coffee every Friday because they had the time, and they continued those conversations. But yeah, I think this is just the version of donuts and coffee because of the stage of life that we are in, and it has to be a two-way street. And if not, it's exhausting. And so there is your permission to cut some friendships if somebody's not willing to reciprocate.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned those conversations happening around the activity of cutting trees, because the way I always think about it, I always go back to like that Dunbar's number, right? It's like, assume that we lived and kind of were optimized for groups of like 120 to 150 people. And like there would be the men out of that group that would go and sit on some high plateau and look out, and they'd be on like a hunt, right? That's their activity. And having experienced that out on hunts with people, when you're sitting there and looking at a landscape and just kind of like the confessional flow that starts happening during the dead periods of the day, it's like, well, yeah, that's why I know there's a you can romanticize the past too much, but it's like, because it's happened to me, I've experienced it, that's like a really good mental health sort of opportunity to just like talk things out. You don't even have to be looking eye to eye with the other guy. You can be sitting there next, shoulder to shoulder, looking out on this landscape, doing some activity. And it's just like the flow of conversation is just really cleansing. And so then you look at our lives now, and it's like we've gone to this like nuclear family concept, which has its pros. I think the cons are like you lose out on those opportunities. And so how do you manufacture them in a way that is like genuine and still leads to that like real beneficial aspect of it? And it's like, yeah, I'm going to draw the hunting conclusion or analogy because like that's what I've experienced. But it's awesome for me to hear that you've seen that with your dad, where it's like it was around the activity of cutting trees. Like that seems totally reasonable to me.
Yeah, and I think as a part of that, you said the word manufacture, and yes, sometimes it does need to be manufactured, and yes, sometimes it's great to sit on the side of a hill with your buddy and look over a mountain. But whenever we had invited you and your family over to our house to, really what amounted to was to cut meat for you and I, that can also be overwhelming if you don't have, like, both of us live here and we don't have family here. And so us going to the mountains by ourselves means a big added pressure to our wives. So I think it's also like, it was a great reminder for me to say, look, we both just came out of a season where we were gone a lot. I don't want to create another situation like that. Why don't we all just get together? Right. And, anyway, I don't know. I think that's just a side note, because there's people that romanticize about the mountains a lot, and that adds a lot of pressure at home. And it doesn't always need to be this. It doesn't need to always be that. And it's, I think, important too, to, do the whole family unit thing. Anyway, complete side tangents.
I agree.
But,
well, and no. This is a beautiful start, because I think it actually leads right into kind of like a good way to intro you, turn it over to you, and allow you to kind of give your backstory. And that is honestly in my assessment of individuals and kind of making that decision about, like, do you work to bring somebody within your community, or do you look at that as a relationship kind of not to pursue? I'll be honest, when I'm looking towards other men, if there's a lack of care around how well they are doing as a father, as a husband, and recently I'll add in as a follower of Christ or a man of faith, if there's not a level of care in those areas, it's something that is not really going to push me to pursue bringing them into the community, like pursuing the relationship. And you are someone that has, like, you've always been a very high bar and standard for me across those areas in terms of like the way you act, the way you care about those things, and the attention that you give to them. So all of that as a primer for why, one, I think our friendship has grown, but two, I truly like value just you in my life, also the story and the perseverance and the challenges that you have overcome, which I think is why there is a connection in the first place, and also just so much unexpected synergy between our stories and the challenges that we face. So to kick it off and give you an opening at introducing yourself, I actually wanted to highlight something that I found a little bit in the depths of the Google search page on you as I was creeping on you.
Oh boy.
This was not a prereq for
our
our friendship, but it did help. It did help with this conversation, getting ready for it. So at your alma mater, University of Southern Indiana, you were an alumni. Digging. Yeah. You were an alumni highlight or spotlight. And the question that was asked was, what brought you to USI? And the beginning of your answer, which is what I'm going to focus in on here, was Initially, it was proximity to my hometown. Comfort kept me there. I do not know the man that answered that question with regards to kind of settling for comfort. So I want to kind of get to know, what led you, what's your story that led to that situation and response with where you decided to pursue your education? And then what has changed since then to bring you to the work that you do today and where you are today?
I've been on and done a lot of podcasts, and I have never been asked a question like that in the best, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, that
I
is
appreciate it.
very, very, very thoughtful. Not just like considerate thoughtful, but that is like you genuinely investing some work to try to ask great questions. Second, I do not deserve all of the things that you said about me in the beginning. That was very kind and thoughtful too. So thank you. To answer this question, I loved my hometown. Everything about it was comfortable, and everything about it is and was why hometowns are what they are, why they are the central theme of country songs, why they are why they are the topic of Hallmark movies and Christmas movies everywhere. Like, I lived in that feeling of loving my hometown and my friends and my family. I loved all of those things. But when I was deciding on a school, I had just lost weight, right? I had just really been introduced to the idea of discomfort, and discomfort being good, and discomfort producing really, really, really great things if you let it. So when that happened and I was trying to make a decision on what to do with the next part of my life, because I went back to school really late, it just, it kind of made the most sense because the career path that I was interested in choosing was available there. I was already in a place that I loved. I was, really interested in trying to save as much money as possible for the next part of my life. And so it was in-state tuition was low. I could live at home, etc. But yeah, I would say that, I mean, I have nothing but great things to say about that university and my hometown, but I would say that period of time because I was not and am not naturally smart. I had to work extremely hard to even pass the subject matter that I was studying. And that's not, when I say I had to work extremely hard, I mean, I just would spend hours teaching myself the subject because I couldn't understand it at the, collegiate level. I couldn't understand what they were saying. So I had to go, figure out basics just to get the concept from that given week. And it was through that, I would say, the irony of your question is what made me get familiar with discomfort and actually kind of liking it was being at the university, just working my tail off, seeing the fruit produced from that work, and then the undeniable and unequivocal feeling of success after doing that, right? Getting the good grade and seeing the weight come off and, running my first mile. I'll never forget the first day I actually ran a mile without stopping. I was 21 years old, never run a full mile in my life. And I remember it like it was yesterday, down to what I was wearing. So it was that's a great question because of, since you've come to know me, you kind of only know me for liking to do things that are hard and challenging, which is not like a medal. Exactly. It seems like everybody wants to make that a medal for themselves anymore. And I don't say that. I just say it for the context of the story. So yeah, it's a great question, but I would say that, the irony of starting there because it was comfortable and it was what was in front of me is actually what introduced me to discomfort, finding how great that can be, and then leading to what what my life is now.
Do you feel like you were at a point in because you reference your weight loss journey, and was it still, when you were making the decision to go to school, was it still sort of an aspect of like, I have so many unknowns and things I'm learning and discomfort in the realm of my personal weight loss journey. I almost just need to keep other things manageable in the rest of my life so that I can focus that time, energy, time and energy towards that area where I do have discomfort. And then over time, you can kind of expand your area of focus as maybe the weight loss becomes more like, hey, just manage it.
I didn't at that time, you know, choose my life's direction based on how simple it could be because I was managing all of these other things. And I think
Okay.
this is a good part of the discomfort conversation. And maybe there's even a bridge here between like your experience with alcoholism and addiction, etc. And that is, to me, it was like, look, this is clearly become an important part of my life. I weighed 270 pounds, lost 140. It didn't just like change what I looked like, it changed my health. I mean, this is
Yes.
dramatic, right? This could be dramatic. That was 17 years ago. I don't know if I'd be alive. I mean, if I kept down
Yeah.
that path, I have no idea what really would
Right.
have happened to me. So this is the point that I was making is at that point, I had worked so hard and seen the fruit of that labor that it was like, it does not matter what I've got to do. My bare minimums for keeping this will absolutely not be replaced by anything. And so I would look at my class schedule and I'd say, you know what? I am going to plan my class schedule around the fact that I am going to move every single day, whether that's with weightlifting or running or walking or whatever. I am not going to plan any class that interferes with that. And now, as that got tougher, as the classes got more complicated because there weren't as many offered during the week.
Right.
Like you kind of had
Right.
one and you had to take it. And then at that stage of the game, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to book that class and I'm going to find another point in my day where it's like, if
Right.
someone invites me to coffee, I'm sorry, I have plans between 2 and 3, but I'll meet you at 3. Well, what are your
Yeah.
plans? I got plans.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
plan
Yeah.
is very much, I'm going to go do and commit to what I said that I would do and commit to. So you know, I did not try to choose easier paths because all of my focus was spun up on this one thing,
Mm-hmm.
because to me, it was like, it doesn't matter what comes to me. These are happening today. My bare minimums
Yeah.
will absolutely get done today. Now, there may be different times that I can dedicate more time to that. I can dedicate more focus to that. I can be more creative in what I make for my meals for the week. And it's not
Yes.
just like your plain Jane, whatever. But, and this is where the term comes from, at a bare minimum, these things will happen because it is important to happen, to keep what I've done. Now, as a part of that, you know, those bare minimums for me may or may not have moved the needle of progress for me that week. If it was weight loss,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, or if it was training, or if it was school or whatever. Sometimes those bare minimums were just to stay focused, just to stay in the habit, right? The
Yep.
phrase that we
Yep.
use all of the time in our nutrition program, and like you and I have talked about, is I would rather be consistently good than occasionally
Mm-hmm.
great. And
Yep.
discipline is easier to keep than motivation is to go find. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there were times where it was like, you know what, will a 30-minute walk today mean I'm going to lose 12 pounds next week? Probably not. But I would rather stay and have the momentum of knowing that I'm going to dedicate some time to exercise than to let that go, because it is way too hard to establish that, I don't want to try to pick it up again.
Yeah. No, and I love that. And that took me a while to ingrain when it came to changing my behavior after rehab. And for me, there's so many parallels with our stories here, even and experiences, even though they, seem like they tread different paths entirely. But the way I've kind of distilled down rehab and explained it to people when they ask about like, well, do I need to go, or is that the right path for me, is like, listen, rehab's your opportunity to take a breath and throw 100 things against the wall and figure out what sticks for you. And then your role after that is to ingrain those things that spoke to you and that started to stick. And, the parallel here is, for me, I came up with really what I classify as like my 5 practices of recovery. The very first one is movement. And I'm very explicit about it not being like it's not a hard exercise. I'm not checking the box on a hard exercise. I learned really early I had to be forgiving of myself, where maybe just the way the day played out, I can only get in a 10 to 15 minute walk with the dog, but I'm going to classify that as my movement practice for the day, because my problem before rehab, when I was drinking, is I had a plan, but I had to perfectly execute against it. And any disruption, even what you were saying about like a class schedule or an unanticipated like coffee invite, any disruption to my plan would just throw everything out the window. And I'd literally trash it, and I'd go on a drinking bender because of it. And so it's like, it was setting the expectation and like really defining what was your priority, and then bringing it into like the practice of your life. And then you can kind of get a little more creative about how things fall into place from day to day, and how you can flex when unknowns might crop up and surprise you.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that, that can sound like, wow, you have no spontaneity to have a call from a friend who,
right,
calls you at 2:00 and says, hey, can you get coffee? And you tell them no, so you can go do this thing and you don't fall out of your rhythm. And it's like, that's not the case at all. I do, I can be, but at the same time, I had a problem, and to establish some autonomy, flexibility, and spontaneity, sometimes you need a period of very unbeautiful structure that doesn't look cool. It doesn't feel fun. It doesn't whatever.
Yep.
There is a systematic process to follow that leads to a known outcome. And there are periods of time where that can serve you really well. If a friend calls me now and says, hey, 2:00, can you go get coffee? Yeah, love to. Yeah. Because I have learned over 17 years that there's 0% chance I don't show up for that workout. There's 0% chance that I don't, give some consideration and thought to what I'm going to eat in a day. There's 0% chance I don't maintain these bare, these bare minimums, because they're so ingrained into me. But I didn't have that trust when I first started, right? I mean, trust in myself led to me getting to 270 pounds. And, it can sound so like, oh, you're so, you talk so negatively to yourself. Oh, I don't. I talk realistic to myself. It did. I was 270 pounds doing whatever I wanted to do. And so I had to, set some ground rules and parameters for myself, until I could be trusted with some spontaneity. And that trust was me and me only. I was single at the time. I had no kids at the time. It was only me. And, I just had this very real talk with myself about that. It is very interesting to me to see, like, when you're overweight, and maybe this is true with addiction too, you have lots of opinions from people about what you should do different and how you should change and what you should and shouldn't do, and all of this concern. And then you go and do something about it, and everyone wants to there's one of two sides. Either they have their opinions about how you're being too obsessive with this, and or it's the other comment was funny to me too, which was, I'm really getting worried about you. You're getting too thin, or you're taking this too far. Or you're taking it's like taking the fact that I go for a walk too far. The fact that I, don't get 6 dips of ice cream when I go get ice cream, right? And no offense to people that may do that. It's just interesting to me that people have opinions when you are something that they think you should be, and then people have
Yep.
opinions when you change those things, which I think again just goes back to the reality of like you have to really sit down and decide what it is that you want, what changes you want to make, and go off of that. Now, it's different if you've got a family, right? You have to include them in some of those decisions, but
Yep.
hopefully that family is supportive and, you guys can come to an agreement together.
Right.
But
Well,
anyway,
a
just
couple
aside.
things on that. One, I always tell people who are early in recovery, bar none, the most difficult aspect of being in recovery is the relationships. It's not avoiding your drug of choice. It is managing through those relationship conflicts in a manner that doesn't cause you to say, screw it, I'm going back. Because a really good way to lash out at someone if they're pushing on you or if they're making you feel uncomfortable and they're sharing their opinions is just screw it, I'm going back to drinking or something like that. That is the relationships, the feedback from others, is bar none the most challenging thing about maintaining long-term recovery. And it's just so unexpected because your life is falling apart. Other people know it, and then you do something to course correct, and it's kind of the most frustrated that I get these days is when someone gets upset at me over what I see as a small issue, because I just want to be like, but wait a second, I'm sober right now. Like, do you remember how terrible things were when I was drinking? Like, can we just agree that things are awesome right now because I'm sober, and like we shouldn't be escalating this petty thing. Like, that is bar none the most frustrating thing when someone has that opinion and kind of like pushes back a little bit on you. And it's like the other thing is like you got to decide if you care about ultimately solving for what is the other person's discomfort. A lot of times, like, I find a lot of people giving not necessarily me feedback, because like my alcohol, like with food, it's like you always have to eat, and which I think is just such a unique challenge with like the weight loss journey. But it's like someone giving you crap for not getting additional ice cream or something. Usually if you trace it back and really work to understand, it's like that person actually has some sort of discomfort that they're not dealing with. Like, maybe because you're not getting the ice cream, they're feeling self-judgmental about it, and they're wanting you to, take the scoop so that they can kind of ease their own discomfort. And you got to decide, like, is that something that you actually want to figure out for that other person, or do you just have to kind of let it bounce off of you and really not drag you down or impact you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in addition to relationship conflict, I'm sure you probably had people saying like, "Oh man, you're just not as fun anymore." Right? Or you're just,
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one for me because I isolated so much. I basically stripped the only people that were around me by the time it was all over um were those that refused to leave. I had pushed away every single relationship. Um Now there is some of that with like old college friends, but it's like I'm never around old college friends. So honestly, like, that's been kind of easy for
hmm
me. It definitely impacts other people in their recovery journey, though.
Yeah, I could see that.
I'd be curious. So you work with clients, obviously, in the space of nutrition. Uh, do you see cases where it's like loved ones, family, and friends are starting to become barriers or cause issues or cause um, concern with your clients as they progress on their own journeys and start hitting milestones and achievements? Does that pop up a lot as a disruption for them?
That's a good question. And I would say we really don't. And a part of why we don't, though, is a major goal of ours is to teach them how to take what they're already doing and rework it to make it better to hit their goals. right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like we have a phrase we use all the time, which is, there's nothing good and there's nothing bad in the world of nutrition. It's always the dose that makes the poison. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you change that dose? How do you rethink what you're already doing to improve your health and your nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, I guess I've never really thought about that, but we certainly have success with that because ideally the family wouldn't feel like they are on their own doing this thing while everybody else continues on, and
Yeah.
they are not self-imposing an altered family diet based on the restrictions that they're following that now has an impact on all of the other family that the family members never wanted to deal with. The
Mm.
idea is that you teach people about nutrition, how to rethink it so that they can still eat kids' boxed mac and cheese, hot dogs, and canned green beans for dinner and hit their nutrition goals, right? And so you're sort of walking people through that strategy. Now, what was interesting is even in my own life, I definitely saw that. Now, granted, when I went through my own weight loss journey, um, I didn't know what I know about with nutrition now, and I was pretty aggressive with it.
Mm.
And
Okay.
that certainly meant eating out a lot less, going out for, treats a lot less. And although I wasn't married, I was dating a girl at the time. And as I continued, like as I started to lose weight and, kept losing weight, it's hard to know if there was a dynamic between our own relationship, things going on with her life, me sort of discovering this and going down, this route that led to us ending up breaking up after like 6 years. Um, or if it was this alone, but I certainly think that this contributed to it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely contributed
Yeah.
to it.
And it's um just looking at those conversations, those pressures that happen, and kind of how it comes back and gets it internalized. One thing that I'm curious about with your journey, if you can provide like a general snapshot, if memory serves, like, do you have an understanding of like what your self-talk was like leading into your decision to pursue weight loss? What was your self-talk like in like the short term after making that change? And then where has it, if you feel like it has leveled out, sort of what is the conversation that you have with yourself when you face say like a setback or an obstacle or barrier? Like, how has that progressed through your journey of weight loss and change?
And that is a good question and probably a podcast in and of itself.
I know.
But the short term was, I mean, the catalyst was Christmas Day, actually, when I was
Mm,
18 years old, laying in my bed after our family would always wake up early. We would open our Christmas gifts, my sister, my stepmom, my dad, and I, and then we would have the bigger family over, later in the day. So we did our family thing, and I went to go lay back down before the rest of the family came over and just started having like these pretty concerning, chest pains and just all of these things at, pretty young age. I was like, I have got to do something. Now, I had said that dozens of times in my
mm-hmm.
life leading up to that. I grew up overweight. That's all I had known to
Okay.
that point,
Mm-hmm.
and had said that, a dozen times. But what did change this time was I started to eat different, right? And, without going down all of these different, without me getting too off track here, the one theme that remained pretty central to everything during those initial acute changes was I would pray every morning on my way to wherever I was going. God, help me be disciplined, but not so disciplined that I'm overwhelmed. And so
Mm,
that whole thing led to me thinking about what's something I feel like I can do today, right? And that led
yeah.
to ordering different at a takeout restaurant. I didn't wake up and say, "No more eating out. No more fast food." I ordered
Mm-hmm.
different when I went to fast food. I didn't start this crazy training plan. I was like, "Okay, well, I'm going to go lift weights. I enjoy that," right? Now, what is interesting and where I would imagine the overlap is with alcoholism, addiction, anything, is that when I started to see the fruits of those little things, it not only motivated me to want to keep doing it, but it made me think, if the little things do that, what happens if I maybe go, stop getting takeout every night and get it once a week? And what if I learn to
Mm-hmm.
cook? Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
those changes just, begot more changes.
Yeah.
Now, you go back to um, your questions of like, well, if those feelings have tapered out now because this is basically your baseline and your new norm and has been for over 15 years, what's your, self-talk like now? I would say number one, even though this is my job and I talk about this and have talked about this with thousands of people in the last 15 years, I still believe and still feel like, and my own personal conversation is, I am not immune to going back to that. I am
Mm.
not immune to when we go out to eat, I still have to be cognizant of what I order. When Christmas
Yep.
time rolls around, just because I like to exercise now and I work with clients and I'm a dietitian, I cannot eat cookie dough every single night and think that I am now immune to gaining weight or that I can rein it back in January. I mean,
Yeah.
I still try to implement as much structure as I did then because I do not want to fall prey to the idea of, because I've been successful, because I've maintained it, because I talk about it all the time, because I have this credential, which means nothing in this world of weight loss, if you personally weight loss, because I have all of these that, I'm not going to go back there. Like, no, what got to me being here was continuing to be focused and not thinking that I'm immune to going
Yeah.
backwards. Now, I will say this too, is like, just as a final to that, I am a huge believer in any outcome you want in life is the byproduct of the system you create to get it. It doesn't just
Mm-hmm.
happen. It's not just by chance. It's not through willpower. It's not through motivation. It is a series of little decisions that lead to that out. If you want that thing, you can have that thing if you build the system that gets the thing. So a
Yes.
major part of that is, okay, I'm not going to violate any point in my system, right? Any of these things that I have that either lead to fat loss or maintain fat loss or is a training derivative that produces it, like my system has to be there to get there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the self-talk now is more of that. And I would say as a part of that, and this again, there's like you and I have talked about a million times, there's so many overlaps between addiction and alcohol and
Mm-hmm.
all of these things and weight loss. There is zero room for negotiation in my head, right? So waking up in the morning and like, I'm tired today. It's kind of just, maybe I'll just get some coffee today. I can go work out tomorrow. That does not happen in my head. It
Yep.
may try
Yep.
to, but I don't
Yeah.
tease it. And there's a phrase that I
Right.
love that I think it was Greg Laurie or someone who had said this, but he said, you can't stop a bird from landing on your head, but you can prevent it from building a nest. Meaning the thought comes all the time that I'd rather sit there and drink coffee and
Yeah.
work out a different day. That comes almost every morning. What's
Yeah.
different is I don't let that bird sit there and build the nest. Nope, I go
Mm-hmm.
get the shoes on. You can have coffee when you're done. You've never felt bad about going. You'll feel great when you get back. It's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And I think that is important when you are trying to establish any habit, whether it be um yeah, a nutrition habit, a fitness habit, breaking the cycle of addiction habit, if you're trying to get out of
Mm-hmm.
debt or you're trying to save for a new home or you're trying to, whatever, like that outcome is yours if you are willing to build the system and endure the parts of that system that may suck.
Mm-hmm. I have something to admit before a follow-up question, but your point about acknowledging and understanding that you still have the ability and potential of sliding back, that your past hasn't defined what happens in the future. I have a little more psychotic way that I I connect and practice with that. When I drive alone, it's not always, but when I drive alone, I glance over to an empty passenger seat and I acknowledge the addictive potential that is still within me. And I just recognize it. It's weak. It's, it hasn't reared its head lately, but I never want to lose sight of the idea that it's gone from me. It's something I've become really comfortable thinking about living with the rest of my life, because I've proven how meaningful and purposeful of a life and an enriched life that I can live with it. So it's not something I'm scared of anymore, but I genuinely acknowledge it. When I'm alone, of course, I don't even want my kids to think I'm that psycho, but it's been a really helpful practice, and I see people relapse because they lose touch with that. And they think, well, I've done it this long. I can go back. Things are reset in my head. I'll be fine. This time will be different. It just never is the case, with the substance addiction that I've seen. So, anyway, note on that. And then I had a question about that Christmas. You said Christmas morning you were laying in bed.
Yeah.
How did you not feel overwhelmed into inaction? Like, I'm just so impressed that you hit a point where you're like, well, I'm going to do something about it. So how did you avoid being overwhelmed?
Well, because I never sought out that first step was never with the intention of it becoming what it became, which was losing 140 pounds. Right. I mean, I knew nothing about nutrition. I just thought, well, man, what if I do the things I know to do, which is not casually walking past their fridge and eating 2 slices of pizza like it's drinking a sip of water. Just started really implementing those small things. So I think that's part of it. And I think another good crossover here is the business. This is my full-time job. We own a business, whatever. When I started this, it was never with the intent of it being what it is, which is my full-time job in our business. It was like, oh, well, it would be really great to have an email for people to email me at if they had questions about nutrition. That naturally led to a couple people asking for help, and that naturally led to people asking if they could pay me for that help. And then those people had success, so they told people, and it grew to this. If I had taken that first step and tried to put in place a marketing plan and an LLC and a financial budget and content like I would have been so, like you said, I would have been so overwhelmed that I wouldn't have even known, where to start. Now,
Yeah.
What I'm thinking in my head is the place that falls apart, but I don't really want to use that terminology, so I'll rephrase it like this. I think there are times where the need to quit something is so significant and potentially life-saving that you just got to stop, right? I mean, you just have to, whatever the cost be, stop. And that is even true in the nutrition world. Like I said earlier, we really try to teach people how to rethink nutrition so they're not overhauling their lives. But there are, for some people, some foods, some social situations, some scenarios, some places where, look, that sounds like a good idea, but they just can't handle it. And so in those times, it is important to say, you know what, maybe for a period of time, you just don't have it. You don't have it around. You don't have it in the house. You get out of your city and go get help rather than trying to not go to the bars or not order a beer when you go to the bars or whatever. Like there's a time where, and this is true of me. You and I have never talked about this, but when I was in high school and college, I went to college for a semester right after high school. I had a big drinking problem and a big drug problem. And I recognized there was a catalyst in my life that really changed all of that. And I severed ties with everybody, everything, moved out of my house for about 3 months, had a little apartment with no contract, just by myself. It was the smartest and best thing I've ever done in my life. And, the people that I cut ties with at that point in my life were people I had known and grown up with for years. But I knew
Yeah.
there was 0% chance of me walking away from that stuff without just severing ties completely. It was
Yep.
way too likely that if I kept spending time around them, hearing stories about what they had did, that I would miss it, show up, and eventually,
Yep.
fall back into that. And so yeah, I think there's times where a slow introduction without thinking about all the things that need to be done are really good. There are times where a complete severance is really good and needed. And, you probably are the only person who's going to know what is the best choice for you in those scenarios. But
Yep.
look, whatever it is, like, you need to just do it. I mean, whatever the
Yeah.
cost, you need to salvage what's left and just do it.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the first step of AA? Because
No.
okay, so it provides, because people have asked me, you can look up articles like what classifies it as addiction. And I did a lot of this searching too, because I always tried to manipulate what I would define my quote unquote problem as. It's like, no, I don't have addiction issues. I'm not an alcoholic. I have I'm a heavy user. Maybe I have substance use like there's all these terms that you can go chasing. But I love the first step for this reason. It distills it down and you can apply it across the board, across your life, not just to addictions, but answer the question honestly, and you need to be honest. Is your life manageable? If your life is not manageable and you want to do something about it, that is the catalyst right there. But you have to be willing to go basically to the ends of the earth to make that change. And like doing some of the actions that you took were required. Like I look at my own story, and one thing that they say is remove yourself from the triggering spaces. Well, I drank in isolation at home. So I knew that it's like, I'm not going to move. We own this house. I'm going to come back into this house. I need to figure out how to live within this space. Yet there were other areas of my life that I did disrupt. So, for example, I didn't step foot in a grocery store for 4 months. 4 months, either my wife picked up the groceries or we ordered them ahead of time and I drove, picked them up, and I kept the receipt. I kept the receipts for everything. We were doing like these really intentional actions of one, gaining trust back in myself in these environments, while also managing the relationship that I needed to build trust back up with my wife. And we were really intentional. And like the first time that I went into a grocery store in those first months, my wife and I game planned it. Like it sounds ridiculous to say, but we talked about what I needed to get and like the route that I was going to take. And I told her, I said, the thing I want to avoid is being caught off guard by like one of those end cap displays where it's like, hey, grab a 6-pack here. And then all of a sudden find myself putting that in the cart and then being off to the races once again. And so we were super deliberate about how we reintroduced that into our lives. And so it was like a really good example about like some of these triggering situations or pieces of your environment, like you can't get away from them. So you're going to have to learn how to manage within them. But there are aspects that you can just be like, and it includes friendships, where you can just be like, nope, I got to separate until I can get things in order in my life. And then I'm going to be deliberate about how I step back into those situations.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny, like the now I can run into a grocery store just like, and it sounds so petty, or not even petty. It sounds like such a non-event to be like, well, yeah, why would going into a grocery store be a struggle? Well, it's because I would come up with any excuse under the sun to go grab even a bag of shredded cheese because it means I could cruise through the booze aisle and grab something to drink. And so there are instances where we need a single bag of shredded cheese these days. And I'm finally to a place where I can do it and truly walk out of there with a single bag of shredded cheese. And yeah, it's like those are the moments too. Like, I don't just dismiss them when they happen. Like, I don't celebrate them wildly. I'm not calling not calling my wife, I'm not calling my family and just being like, guess what I just achieved today? I bought cheddar and no booze. But it is something where I do take a moment now and recognize, like, this would have thrown me in the past. And that helps build on the not even momentum, but the commitment to the practices more than anything.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. So we have actually hardly talked about nutrition, and just kind of keeping an eye on the time. I did want to ask you one, maybe two questions specific to nutrition. What out there in the world of influencers, advice, the broad internet, what out there is the most concerning, like legitimately most concerning information that you're seeing put out there? And conversely, like, what is, and you don't need to name names, but conversely, like, what is the most, in your mind, like, tried and true way, even if it's unsexy? And I think that will lead into valley to peak.
Yeah. Oh man, you say the most harmful thing out there right now?
Yes.
I think the most I think the most harmful, I think there's a couple things, right? Man, that's a good question. I think one of the most harmful things out there is any extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And not just because of their unsustainability, but because of the ramifications that can come as the byproduct of following them. Even if not acutely, they could come over time. And that's maybe the most dangerous part, is that we have not had enough time with these
Mm-hmm.
extremes to see the ramifications of them, right? Like, here's
Yep.
a great irony. And this is going to sound sort of humorous, but I'm certainly not poking fun at it because the person lost their life. Atkins, right? Low carb, high protein, high fats. You can eat cheese and bacon, but he died of a heart attack,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I don't think that we have had a lot of time with some of these new approaches with extremisms as far as nutrition to know what sort of long-term play do they have. Another one would be like carnivore, which on one side you have the same element that we're talking about with that, where it's like really high in fat, really high in
Mm-hmm.
protein, and the negative outcomes that can tie to that. But in addition to that, you have a large percentage of those people eating seared meats, grilled meats, things like that. Well, there's a pretty strong tie and correlation between increased colon cancer, increased risk of cancers with eating charred, burnt, grilled meats. And that's even with smaller portions than what a large percentage of the people that are eating these. In conjunction with that, it's basically a zero fiber intake, which is the one nutrient that we know significantly reduces all cancer risk. So you have all of these things combined. It's like, okay, well, there's way, way more to stories like this than does your waistline shrink, right? Your waistline shrinking is not the sole indicator of your overall health at all, at all. Yet that is what most people chase and choose, largely because of, as you said, these social media followings. So I think that the most dangerous advice out there is not a diet, an approach, a whatever. It is these extremisms. You even take um, I don't want to throw specific companies and products under the bus, but you even take, let me think how I want to say this. Other extremes on the side where it's extremely healthy, lots of smoothies with greens, etc. Well, you can
Mhm.
develop certain kidney problems from an excess consumption of these things. And that's the problem with some of these products that are being pushed is they are in quantities with nutrients that are never found in nature, ever. They are in
Yeah.
such abundance that it's like, okay, where some is good, more can be harmful. And
Mhm.
so, that's the other risk is like you have extremes on both ends. You have extremes on like the don't do, you have extremes on the do this and do it in abundance and increase the amount. And we find that there is like this bell-shaped curve where good nutrition or changing your nutrition is beneficial if it was poor to begin with.
Mhm.
But when you go above and beyond on either side of those, it could not only be not beneficial, but it could potentially be harmful too, right?
Yeah. And
So
are there studies out there about the I don't know if this is the right terminology, but the rebound effect that happens when people cycle off these really stringent extreme diets and then the goal they were going for gets exceeded going the opposite direction from where they baseline started.
you have between a 2 and 5% marker of the number of people who lose a significant amount of their body weight and keep it off for more than a year. Between 2 and 5% of the
That's
population
it.
that lose it a significant amount, right? We're not talking about like 2 and 5 pounds here and there. We're talking
Yeah.
about a significant amount, a certain percentage of your total body weight, and then keep that off for more than 365 days. There's between 2 and 5% of that. So significant, in fact, that we want to know about the 2 and 5%. What are you doing
Yeah.
to do this? And they
You're
have
the outlier in this case.
and so they have created a registry of these people that they survey, and they try to figure out, what is the common thread among these people that they all seem to be, doing in some shape, form, or fashion that makes them this 2 and 5%. And the irony is that none of them are doing extremes. None of them are.
Mhm.
They all
Mhm.
do basics. And this sort of loops in your second question, that you had asked me there too. They all in some way, shape, or form move almost every day, whether that's a walk or intentional exercise, sweat, no sweat, doesn't matter. They're doing something to move. They
Mhm.
are doing something to alter their nutrition from what they had previously done. They all eat fruits and vegetables in some degree, shape, or form, and very few of them are eating out that often. Now, there are others too, but those are some of the big ones. The thing that I have learned in working with people, knowing about that, doing it myself, etc., is this: that in and of themselves, none of those things are going to do it. None of those, no one of those things put those people in the category of the 2 and 5%. It's the collection of those things, and more importantly, and this is what I think, is all of those things collectively make that person feel like they are an individual who cares about their health. It's on their mind. It's on their
Yep.
mind, right? And because they identify with being a healthy person, everything that they do tends to veer more on the side of I'm health conscious, right? So they're
Yep.
probably not, staying up late. They're probably not eating rolls of cookie dough over the holidays, which is something I used to do. They're probably not, you know, they're doing all of those little things that seem to matter. And
Yeah.
to answer your point, that's where extremisms fall short is, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
people are successful if you define success as a shrinking waistline or a
Mhm.
lowering scale metric, right? Okay, yes, you're successful in that standpoint. But what they find is they are not successful long term. And when you interview these people, these are not like my assumptions. When you interview these people, hey, what happened? It was too hard. It was too hard. Like I couldn't do it. And part of what makes it too hard goes back to the conversation that I said earlier, which is if you are trying to throw in things that are not congruent with your whole life and your family's life, like it's going to be difficult. You would be better off to
Yeah.
figure out and say, okay, look, I am not naive. It doesn't look like these dino nuggets and kids max, this box of kids mac and cheese and a can of green beans is like going to make it on Better Homes and Gardens as the quality meal of the year award. But
Hmm.
it's what I've got, right? It's what is my reality. Can I make this
Yeah.
work? The answer to that's yeah, you can. Believe it or not,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah. And then do you feel like that gives, as your clients start making progress, and I mean making progress in terms of like the action of working with you, not even necessarily weight loss, do they start to take on more kind of like autonomy and decision making in the broader scope of their life, where all of a sudden you're getting on a call with them and they're driving and making decisions where it's like, oh, you're starting to compile a lot of these practices together, and some of them we haven't even talked about. You're just taking the initiative and doing it yourself.
Yes, and I would say that, obviously that happens with nutrition, but the thing that I did not expect is the comments that we hear the most often is the structure with the discipline, creating that system may have been the catalyst, but it's bled over into other areas in their life. And so they say really
Mm-hmm.
two things that I didn't expect. Number one, they help around home more, right? So they just find themselves to make the bed. They are now doing the laundry. They're now, doing the dishes. They're doing some of these things at home that they maybe weren't previously doing, right? And the second is they quit drinking altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
comment that we hear most often, I had a call with a guy just before we got on this. He said the exact same thing. He was like, it usually starts like this. They recognize that alcohol contains calories, so in an effort to move fat, they just start drinking less. And then they realize, well, geez, that really wasn't that hard. Wonder what this would look like not having it at all. And then they realize they're really not missing anything, so they just don't go back to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to think that it would happen in a way like you're phrasing it, in which case one nutrition habit begets another, like, oh, well, he stopped eating fried foods and he also started drinking more water. Yeah, that happens, but it happens in more unexpected ways too, which is they start helping out around the house more. They start finding things that weren't really serving them, even if they weren't doing it in an over consumptive type of way. I just feel like, God, this really isn't doing anything for me. I can do without
Yeah.
it. So they stop that
Yeah.
too.
That's incredible to hear. And honestly, it's one of the things that I've felt in doing this work, but also just being a part of the recovery community is I'm very drawn, I'm very compelled by the idea of how much locked up potential there is in the world, in the addicted population.
Mm.
And it's not like someone's going to resolve their issue with cocaine, heroin, alcohol, and all of a sudden become a Forbes 100 CEO or something like that, or even start their own business, or even like pursue passions. But I take that last one back, but it really is about rediscovering the person who can step in and be the father, brother, husband that he never was before. And like, look at the impact just to that family then. And the potential just at that population level for these small but meaningful changes and direction altering in the life is just, it's just profound. Because yeah, when you start tightening things up, not even tightening things up, but course correcting. And for me, like a big thing was learning how to talk to myself and still like wanting to progress, but being forgiving with yourself. Like when you can start sinking that in as like this core lesson and then apply it across a life, like the things that I've learned pertaining to avoiding the urge or not even feeling the urge or desire to drink. It's like, man, those learnings have applied across my life. And truly, 2.5+ years into it, I'm living in a better place than I ever could have imagined. Like I couldn't have, even with everything that happened, I could not have written out this script to my life from the point that I was at to being any better. And it's really compelling, and it's hard not to care about trying to help and seeing the progress that people can make, whether it's with eating and nutrition and weight loss, or addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah, I think it's great, and you're doing a great job of it too, leading the way.
Yeah, and same back to you. And like I kind of opened this with like genuinely cherish and value and love your friendship, your family's friendship, and everything that has developed in what is coming up on 2 years of knowing each other. And the first time we met, I will be honest, I hardly remember it because I think I was so tired. But it was awesome that we got back here to Boise from Bozeman and stayed in touch and got together and then connected over hunting and my poor shooting abilities, and just the love and the pursuit of the outdoors. So no, thank you. I love you, love your family, and just really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's a mutual feeling, and I do remember like it was yesterday running into you guys in Bozeman, and then actually, we didn't talk for a while, and I ran into you
Mhm.
at a gas station
That's right. Yeah.
buying elk tags, and I think
Yep.
that's where we sort of swapped numbers and, kept the conversation going. And but yeah, I appreciate you and your friendship too, and your enthusiasm and just optimistic outlook is very contagious. I appreciate your friendship. We kind of talked a little bit about friendships early on, and you are the epitome of a great friend that you try. it's
Yeah, that's
it's
the best I
sad that
can
that's
do.
like the bar. It's sad that
I
that's
know.
the bar is like, you can see when a guy is really just giving effort in a friendship. And I told
Mhm.
told my wife, many times that I appreciate that about you. So
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you.
having me on here. And
That's genuinely the best compliment I could ask for. I try.
yeah, well, you succeed, man. You
Thank you.
succeed.
Amazing. Appreciate it. Thank you for spending your time here. If this conversation was helpful, you can follow More Than Capable wherever you listen to podcasts. I also share longer form writing on the More Than Capable Substack, exploring these ideas in further depth. You can follow the Substack by going to morethancapable.life. That's morethancapable.life. If this conversation mattered to you, pass it on. That's how this community grows. Until next time, keep showing up, keep doing the work, and live with joy and wonder, regardless of the challenges you face.